Let me therefore offer to you the keynote speech of our business stream. May I now invite the president of the Observer Research Foundation from India, Samir Saran, who hosted yesterday's panel on the Technology Alliance project, and who I would now like to welcome back to the stage of European Cybersecurity Forum.
Thank you for having me back once again. I thought you had enough of me yesterday, but indeed, I think what you have arranged at this conference is the single most important issue that everyone needs to engage with together against an adversarial internet. What I would like to do is I would like to present the global context, the second order effects, what the pandemic teaches us, and a glimpse of what is happening in India with some suggestions at the very end. The Federal Minister of Germany has already identified the importance of working together to preserve security and our strategic interests. My presentation is a whole of society presentation, business and enterprise at the heart of it, but certainly democracy and our way of life being the fortress we need to defend. Let me start by making a strong proposition. We are already in a divided internet. The technology domain is already split and the splinternet is already here. Fragmentation and the exertion of sovereign control is visible at every level of the technology stack. We see the resources, rare earth minerals, being a very important political tool in the hands of certain governments. We see a clamor for control over the infrastructure, be it undersea fiber cables, be it the 5G networks that are being rolled out. We are beginning to see zero-sum competition in the business and political domains around this very important and critical undergirding of the future. We see a race for the control of the cloud, of the GitHubs, of the innovation incubators. We see a clamor for a clamor of voices to control the protocols and the standards and the pipelines that will define global data flows, that will control the global standard setting organizations, that will create payment processes, pretty much like the Indian UPI, where we have come up with our own version of a cashless payment system, and many such similar efforts around the world. We see a very strong exertion of sovereign control over the presence of certain businesses. For example, both the US and India have banned Chinese apps, are against the promotion and propagation of certain business models that the Communist Party of China seeks to embed within our business systems. And of course, we see the battle for political norms, human attention, and human behavior. Misinformation, influence operations, regime instability, weaponization of data are all activities that are beginning to confirm to us that the internet is not only divided, that not only are we living in the splinternet, but we are also living in a very contested and conflictual space. There are very few libertarian spaces left. Perhaps only crypto and blockchains are those last vestiges of open spaces, and those two are seen as dark and deadly by many governments around the world. Now, what is accelerating this reality? Nationalism. And I think we must not shy away from dealing with this very important issue. There is a strong feedback loop between the politics of technology, between the politics of countries, and between economic gains. Economic actors are sometimes competing with and sometimes complementing political forces. And this is shaping our world like never before. This is once in a century moment. It happened in the beginning of the 20th century. We are witnessing it again in a different context in the 21st century. We must engage with this very new reality. Industrial transformations, and I think this is really important. From the factory floor, we have moved to the mobile phones. More value is created on our mobile phones than in many industrial units around the world. There is a new relationship that has emerged between resources, productivity, growth, and security. Also, we see new mobilizations. The old trade unions are no longer relevant. People are beginning to mobilize and contest politics, change economics, and seek safety through different kinds of aggregations, much of which are virtual, many of them induced by technology. A new political system is being born. Economics will not remain the same once the work and workspace has changed forever. This is that moment again that we need to think about. We, of course, are also witnessing uh, the impact on economics and the impact on politics around the world due to the second order effects of the US China technology war. People are invariably and inevitably going to have to choose sides. The European obsession of remaining in the middle may not be something that will last too long. Countries will need to make decisions, countries will need to decide what suits them better, immediate economic gain or long term economic sustenance and sustainability. I think those are choices that need to be made now. The allure of Chinese money and Chinese markets in emerging markets in developing countries is very strong. Those geographies will also have to take the long view if they need to come up with a resilient and sustainable economic model. And I think one of the most important impacts on the technology domain is indeed the gray swan or the gray rhino event, what we call COVID 19. What 9/11 did for surveillance, COVID 19 is going to do for our technology future. I think the impact on the technology politics, technology businesses, and technology societies is far greater than we have begun to understand. I think COVID 19 tells us many stories about our future, but I particularly want to share with you one learning that this pandemic has given to me personally. When the pandemic came upon us, I saw two different responses around the world. The first was from a country where all of its citizens, its diaspora, its international institutions work together to bring back home masks, PPEs, medicines, ventilators, all resources required to respond to the pandemic. Every person of Chinese origin, nearly, and I'm exaggerating because this is a keynote, but millions of Chinese worked together to create one of the most robust responses to the pandemic. They brought back home everything that was needed, sometimes at the cost of others. They worked tirelessly to create a national moment, and they did it. While on the other hand, the capital on the hill was burning. There was recrimination, there was accusations, there was action that was lost due to the cross purposes and the multiverse of views that were seeking to respond to the pandemic. This story to me tells me something. It tells me that on the one hand, you have a technology system that is emerging, which has a very efficient political, social, and economic basis because the people that are going to be operating this technology system are working together. On the other hand, the liberal order is in disarray. Disunity defines it. We will have to work together. We will have to find ways of creating consensus amongst the open democratic societies if we are to compete with this well-oiled machine that is promoting and proposing a very different technology future. And I think that's the most important takeaway as far as COVID 19 is concerned for me. But notwithstanding, what we are witnessing now is a global race to identify and consolidate strategic assets at the national level. It means that we are beginning to see supply chains being captured by certain political systems, by certain technology systems, by certain enterprises. We are also seeing countries with certain kind of minerals being signed on to manage and control those assets in those countries. We have moved away from the age of oil, fuel, and iron to the age of lithium, nickel, and cobalt. Very different kind of geopolitics is likely to emerge, and it is going to change the geo-economic landscape dramatically. We are also going to see a global realignment on the technology, economic, and social levels based on trust. Now, it is not, trust is a contextual word. I think there are two or three different systems of trusts that are likely to emerge. You obviously have China Tech, which is basing its own growth on a certain system of political cohesion. You have a value-based proposition from EU. You have a market-based proposition from America. You have a public data-based, very small fledgling Indian offering as well. And you have some other systems that are coming up. But I think trust is going to be the key operating system, and countries that trust each other will partner with each other. Countries that trust each other will allow their companies to operate in their ecosystems. So globalization is going to fast move from being an open world framework to a gated system where countries will be given passes to enter and participate in each other's futures. It is something that is already happening, and I think you are going to see more barriers come up in the future. Now, I am particularly thrilled to hear the word sovereignty being used many times by my European friends and European colleagues. Cyber sovereignty has a connotation in India as well, and I thought I would probably engage with that. In my assessment, cyber sovereignty in India is not a replication of the Chinese Great Firewall. It is not an attempt to block IPs, filter data, spoof DNS, go after political opponents, kill free speech. We may be doing some of that invariably, but that is not the prime definition of cyber sovereignty in India. Nor is it an ideological repudiation of the normative values of global internet. I think India recognizes the importance of being connected more than anyone else. The next 10 years are most important for the Indian growth story. And for us to be beneficiaries of global trade, global value chains, global valuations is most critical. And therefore, the Indian cyber sovereignty is not a repudiation of a connected space. It is also not about just the internet or the cyberspace. It is more broadly about the technology ecosystems which implicate many old industries and new enterprises equally. For me, it is also a misnomer. Cyber sovereignty is perhaps wrongly deployed very often. It is an application of the 20th century vocabulary and grammar to a 21st century reality and ambition. In some sense, this becomes apparent when you look across certain themes. An expression of political intent. When we say cyber sovereignty, are we defining the reality which is the social contract, which is largely local, and foreign technology companies are unable to mediate in this space? Or are we speaking about cyber sovereignty and we want international companies to become part of local social contracts? And how we accommodate the transnational corporations and international technologies within local social contracts is going to be one question which the word cyber sovereignty seeks to complicate and perhaps capture. It is also an economic realization. Cyber sovereignty is also an economic announcement. It is an announcement of a country like India, which is tasked with the very difficult objective of achieving middle income status purely in the fourth industrial revolution. This is something that has never been done before. No other country has become middle income and has moved millions out of poverty in this particular industrial revolution cycle. India is tasked to being the first one, and perhaps when we say cyber sovereignty, we are also making an economic announcement. It is also a geopolitical word which is deployed loosely. It is a realization that India's largest security threat is going to be in the digital domain. The front line of our future conflicts, of our future security challenges will be the digital Silk Route, will be the digital BRI, and of course, the Indo-Pacific, which is itself a fake and artificial geography, is going to be a digital Indo-Pacific for many of its strategic considerations. But I think what it represents beyond just the political vocabulary is an opportunity. It is an opportunity to reframe the international liberal order and perhaps move the international liberal order from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean. Now, the European Court of Justice decision in Schrems 2 suggests possibly not. And I think this is something that is going to be contested as well. But I think if India tech was to emerge, we will see a movement of this particular order towards the Indian Ocean. Also, the huge human talent pool, the young demography, makes a compelling case for this shift to happen. And I think that as India emerges as a digital power, its most important partner in the days ahead is likely to be Europe. Now, of course, we are seeing some coalitions emerge. We have seen the concept of the D10, which has been promoted. We have seen the global partnership on AI, which has emerged. We are beginning to see like-minded countries work together. We are seeing the Japan, Australia, India initiative for resilient supply chains. We are beginning to see India partake and participate in a number of global initiatives that will secure our digital future. Some of them are low-hanging fruits, which are informal normative processes, the Paris Call, the Christchurch Call, the coalitions that I just mentioned. Some are more contentious, like the UNGGE or the Open End Working Group, or even competition and tax laws and regulations. And some are severely contested, such as data localization, infrastructure around 5G and the cloud, and security, intelligence, and surveillance mechanisms. Here we see differences between India and some other liberal countries.
Thank you very much for that very extensive introduction to our business stream. Absolutely extensive. Thank you very much.